To wrap up this lecture, I would like to just provide a quick overall summary and hit the high points of coding in regression. And so the first thing I think to keep in mind at the most broad level is that dummy coding is most commonly used, I believe, in our fields. And my thinking is the reason this might be the case is that typically we aren't working with predictor variables that have four or more levels, for example. So we're not working with, for example, 6 different therapy methods and attempting to, understand the differences among them. We're typically not looking across 9 different organizations and attempting to notice differences across them. However, that's not out of the realm of possibility. So I want you to know what it is and how to use it. Typically, more often in our fields, we're looking at dichotomous predictors like gender, basic 0, 1. Those are awesome. They're just very simple and easy. Or we're looking, for example, at maybe 3 groups or 4 groups. Maybe we have a hypothesis about which ethnicities will differ from one another on various outcomes, and that's really important for our research on selection fairness, for example, for jobs, or other kinds of questions where ethnicity and race matter to our to what we want to understand. And so for those, again, this is going to be helpful perhaps when you're thinking about making comparisons across groups. Contrast coding is analogous to planned comparisons in one-way ANOVA. So contrast coding is always guided by some a priori theory of which groups you believe will differ from one another. Contrast coding saves on numerator degrees of freedom. That's very helpful. So in the notes at the bottom of this slide, I give you a couple of cases where you would want to be tipped off that contrast coding would be the way to go over dummy coding. So contrast coding would be more desirable when a categorical variable has a lot of levels, and I would say many in this case is defined by more than 3. So when there's more than 3, dummy coding is probably not going to serve you well because it will substantially increase your numerator DF. So we don't want that. Second, when you have a complex a priori hypothesis, for example, you're trying to contrast one or more groups against another set of groups. For example, you predict that departments 1 to 3 will be significantly different somehow from departments 4 and 5. There's no way to test that in dummy coding. You have to use a contrast code for that. And finally, there's a very important point. We choose the type of coding based on how we want to interpret the constant and the B weights. And this is specifically in terms of the signs. So when we assign a negative weight to a group, we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at the output, because that's those things that decisions that we make when we're creating the weights, the signs of the weights are going to determine how you interpret the B weight at the end of the analysis. So for a review on that, go back to the screencast where I talk about this B weight is positive because we coded these departments positively and they have the higher mean. And so whoever has the higher mean, their sign that you gave them is going to be the sign of the B weight. And finally, the choice of coding doesn't affect our overall model testing. So our R and R squared are going to be the same. Our F test and significance of F will be the same. Regardless of what coding scheme we use. So if we use dummy coding, it will be the same as using all possible orthogonal contrasts. So you can look at those ANOVA tables and they will be exactly the same. So that's helpful to know. All right, so these are just some of the highlights for, again, what will guide your decision in the type of coding that you use. And then when you use contrast coding and dummy coding, both, there are things to keep in mind when looking at the output. So for review of those things, refer back to the previous screencasts.